this evening we shall discuss two kinds of truth, satya. The Buddha only taught two types of truth. The first is known as samuti satya, or conventional truth, and the second is known as ultimate truth, paramatha satya. So we have to rightly understand two types of truth. The Buddha need to explain the teaching, use his teaching based on this conventional truth, as well as the ultimate truth. So what is conventional truth? Conventional truth is known through perceptions or sanya. Through perception, we come to know there's a person, a man, or a woman, or self. We also perceive the conventional truth by recognizing the shape or the form. For example, when we perceive or see an animal in the shape of a dog, then we give a name, dog. So this name dog is a conventional designation. It is also a conventional truth. So we understand conventional truth through perceptions. But the Buddha also taught us ultimate truth, paramatha satya. So in the teaching of ultimate truth, there is no self in the ultimate sense. There is only nama-rupa, or mental physical phenomena, or the five aggregates. So they are truly exist in the ultimate sense. But in the conventional sense, one could not realize or comprehend that in the ultimate reality there are only nama-rupa, or mental physical phenomena. We can't comprehend or realize ultimate truth through perception or sanya. We can only realize ultimate truth through wisdoms or panya. So we have to develop wisdoms in order to realize the ultimate truth. So the Buddha explained the teaching based on these two types of truth. Is important is because if one doesn't understand these two types of truth correctly, they may give rise to wrong understanding. So Buddha needs to explain the teaching based on these two types of truth. For example, when Buddha wants to explain about the virtue of moral shame and moral fear or moral dread, then the Buddha needs to explain with conventional truth. So the Buddha say there be a person feeling shame or committing certain evils, such as telling lie. It's not possible to explain this value or virtue of moral shame and moral fear or moral dread with by ultimate truth. It's not possible to say that there is no self is experiencing any kinds of moral shame when there's a commission of evils. Similarly, when the Buddha want to explain, for example, karma, then the Buddha also have to explain with using this conventional truth. But it doesn't mean that there's a permanent self. Just like when we say, just like in the conventional world, we say that the tree is the trees when one has planted a seed, then the seed will produce the flowers, the trees, then bear fruits and so on. So similarly, the Buddha have to explain the karma with conventional truth. The Buddha have to explain the practice of Brahma Vihara. In other words, the practice of loving kindness or compassion, sympathetic joy, and the practice of equanimity with conventional truth. So when we practice metta, we have to develop the thoughts of metta towards a person or being or all beings and so on. So it's not possible, for example, one develops metta to the four material elements, towards the five elements and so on. So one have to understand, but the Buddha also needs to teach ultimate truth. If there's no teaching of ultimate truth, then it's not possible to attain enlightenment to be free from this cycle of birth and death. But if the Buddha taught only ultimate truth and did not teach conventional truth, then those who do not endow with a proper mental attitudes or right understanding, then they may have the wrong view or wrong understanding. They might think, since the Buddha said that there's no self, so they might think there's no such thing as mine or yours. There's no such thing as my property, my wife, your wealth, your wife. It's because self does not exist. So those who do not have the wisdom or proper mental attitude, they may not able to understand the ultimate truth correctly. Since the Buddha said there's no self, because everything subjects to arising and passing away, not satisfactory, and no self, or without a self, so they might think that there's no such thing as mine or yours, belonging to him, and so on. So because of wrong understanding, they may commit evils, taking the properties belonging to others. They may violate the third precepts, and so on. In that way, they may take rebirth in a state of loss. State of loss means a higher world, such as the world of the hungry ghosts, the hell, the animal world, asura. But those who are endowed with moral shame, moral fear, could avoid or abstain from all kinds of evil. So they may doing a lot of good deeds, such as the practice of dana, or observance, morality, and the practice of concentration, with the intention to be born in the Deva or Brahma world, and so on. And sometimes they develop clinging or grasping for that notion of self. So because of this clinging or grasping to the notion of self, they could not be free from this cycle of birth and death. So in order to overcome or remove the grasping or clinging to the notion or the notion of self, or the view of self, then the Buddha taught the ultimate truth. So the Buddha taught us the ultimate truth. So if one wishes or aspires to realize the ultimate truth, then one needs to develop wisdom. It is not possible to realize ultimate truth by perception or sanya. Through perception, one could only see the form, the shape. For example, one see the form of the humans or the shape of the animals. So it's difficult for those perceptionists to see the ultimate truth. It's difficult for them to understand the mind or consciousness. It's because the mind or the consciousness is formless, shapeless. It's difficult for those perceptionists could understand the mind or consciousness because it has no shape, no form. To them, form or shape is something real. So they cling to the shape of the form because it's something very real to them. So it's even more difficult for them to understand nibbana or enlightenment. They might think nibbana is a place, or there's a everlasting self which will enjoy everlasting happiness in a special place or special palace and so on. It's because through perception they could only see form, shape. Similarly, in the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, at the beginning of practice, mindfulness meditators will perceive the shape of the form of the body, perceive the shape of the form of the arms, the legs, the form of the abdomen, and so on. It's the nature of the undeveloped mind to perceive the form or to cling to the form, which to them is something real. But in the practice of mindfulness meditation, we have to realize the ultimate truth. So we have to develop mindfulness gradually, so that the mindfulness is getting more and more attentive, precise. So what are the ultimate truth? The ultimate truth is the mind or the citta or consciousness. To those who only understand conventional truth, they may not able to understand that it is the mind or the consciousness that has the characteristics to know or to cognize something, because they could not understand the mind. So to those who only understand conventional truth might think that it's me or an I that hears or see the visible object and so on. But to those who develop wisdoms by the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditation, they would come to realize the true nature of the mind and mental states better and better. So when mindfulness meditators are able to develop more attentive and precise mindfulness, and when there's deep concentration, they could see the noting mind clearly. Is the mind that cognizes or knows the phenomena, such as the movements of rising, movements of falling during sitting meditation, the movements of lifting process, pushing process, and dropping process during walking meditation. It's the mind that inclines towards the object, to know the object. The body doesn't have the characteristic of knowing or cognizing. The body is not able to move or perform any actions without the mind. So the meditators could see clearly, then the consciousness of hearing is getting clearer, or conscious of seeing is getting clearer, and so on. So when meditators could gain more and more experiences in the practice of mindfulness meditation, then that wrong view or the notion of self is also getting weaker. It's because one has not yet rightly understood the true natures of mental and physical phenomena through personal experience or direct experience. Then this notion or the view of self is arising. So because of this view or notion of self or person or being, so this notion or view of self or give rise to other defilements, for example desires, desire for a pleasant feeling. Even sometimes meditators also desire for something pleasant, or they desire that the meditation will be going on smoothly, without any hindrances, and so on. So that's why it's important to mindful and note the desire for something, desire for some experience. This desire, in fact, is a hindrance to the progress. So one who is able to understand better and better the true natures of mentality and physicality, or in the words, Namarupa, then one could be overcome this notion of self gradually. So the clinging to this notion of self also getting weaker and weaker. Then one will be able to conduct oneself better in the conventional world, in the conventional world. You may understand it from your experience. If one take things very personally, one may suffer more. If you take things very personally, you may suffer due to some unpleasant incidents and so on. But when you have experience of mindfulness meditation and understand about the true natures of mentality and physicality, then the notion or the view of self is getting weaker and weaker. Then you might not take things personally. You could conduct yourself well. When you are encountering the vicissitudes of life, as you know, we are, everyone of us will be encountering or experiencing eight kinds of vicissitude in life. This vicissitude life are eight, or sometimes known as 4 pairs of vicissitude of life. They are gain and loss, fame and defame, blame and praise, and the 4th pair is happiness and pain. So we are suffering. So one who develop insight knowledge, understanding the true natures of mental and physical phenomena, they are not permanent, subject to arising and passing away. They are not satisfactory. They are not self. When one is endowed with deeper and deeper Vipassana knowledge, or insight knowledge, then one is able to face with the vicissitude of life with equanimity, with equanimity to a certain extent. Only the noble ones, Arahant, who has attained the highest stage of enlightenment, will remain in complete equanimity when facing the vicissitude of life. So this is taught as one of the blessings in the Mangala Sutta. So we have to understand these two types of truth. They do not contradict each other. Sometimes some could not understand why on one hand the Buddha say no self or not self. On the other hand, there's a self. but this is merely a conventional destination. Even the Buddha wants to explain the teaching. The Buddha has to use two types of proof. For example, in the practice of dana, the givers is a conventional truth. It's just a conventional destination. The recipients is another conventional destination. The food, such as the rice and so on, is a conventional destination. Only the volition is one of the mental concomitants, or one of cetasika, which is the ultimate truth. So we have to understand this ultimate truth well, so that we could overcome the clinging to the notion of self or the ego. In fact, this wrong view of self, or sometimes translated as ego, is the immediate cause of other defilements. When we look at the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, the second Noble Truth, the truth of the cause or the origin of suffering, is arising because of wrong view, or the view of self. So this view of self arising because of ignorance. Here is because of ignorance to the true natures of mental and physical phenomena. So it's because of this ignorance, the view of self arising. If one could overcome ignorance by wisdoms or panya. So here wisdom, panya, means understanding or realizations of the true nature of mental physical phenomena. In other words, impermanence, unsatisfactories, and no self or not self. Then one will be overcoming on the notion or the view of self at that moment. So we have to understand the Buddha taught us two types of truth. So when we practice mindfulness meditation, we have to develop the mindfulness in order to realize the true natures of mentality and physicality. So in other words, the true natures of the mentality and physicalities are impermanence, unsatisfactories, and not self. So when meditators develop mindfulness constantly, continuously, they may be able to realize the true natures of physical phenomena clearer and clearer. For example, they are experiencing the movements of rising or falling are getting clearer and clearer. During walking meditation, they also be mindful, precisely, attentively, the process of lifting, pushing, dropping, movements clearer and clearer. And there are many process of movements while meditators are doing their routine activities, such as eating, drinking, and so on. So when meditators could perceive the movements clearer and clearer, eventually they also come to see clearer and clearer other physical phenomena. When they can see or perceive the true nature of physical phenomena better and better, then they also come to realize the mental states and the consciousness clearer and clearer. At the beginning of practice, the consciousness is not clearly perceived. In other words, whatever consciousness that's arising dependent on the physical phenomena is not clearly perceived at the beginning of practice. But when you could develop mindfulness better and better, then you could perceive that the arising of consciousness, for example, when there's movements, then there's arising of consciousness cognizing the movements. When you can perceive the arising of consciousness, then you come to realize that consciousness is arising and passing away very instantly. It's almost at the same moment with that with the process of that movement. Sometimes meditators perceive that the consciousness of cognizing or knowing the movements is arising almost at the same time with that movements. Although we know from the scriptures that there's arising of the movements, then there's arising of this consciousness of knowing, one after another. But we can say both arise at the same moment. Sometimes meditators perceive that the thinking and the consciousness of knowing the thinking is arising almost at the same moment with the thinking. So they might think that there are two minds, but in fact there's only one mind or one mental state is arising at one moment. But the process of the mind or consciousness is very swift, very rapid. So it gives us an impression that both processes are happening almost at the same moment. So when meditators could practice better and better, they come to realize the process of mindfulness or awareness is very swift, very rapid. Sometimes the mindfulness or awareness could perceive one object, perceive the various objects one after another very rapidly. Meditators may not able to exercise any form of control over that, over the rapid process or the swift process of the mind or the noting mind. In fact, when meditators could realize the swiftness of the mind, and the mind is arising dependent on an object, they may come to understanding no self or not self, anatta, clearer. We have explained in the previous talk that the mind or consciousness is arising dependent on the object. there is no maker. Maker means a person or yogi to make it arise. It's because there's a condition, then the awareness or the consciousness of knowing arising instantly. So sometimes meditators might think that I have to arouse my mindfulness, I have to bring up my mindfulness to note the object and so on. But if meditators could develop clear mindfulness, they come to realize mindfulness, in other words, the consciousness knowing is arising by itself whenever there's object. Unless the mindfulness is weak, then meditators might have to put some effort to guide the mindfulness or the awareness to the objects. So when meditators could see the relationship between the mindfulness, or in other words the conscious of knowing, they come to understanding these are characteristics of not self, anatta, better and better. So when meditators could understand the ultimate truth better and better, definitely this clinging to the notion of the self also getting weaker and weaker. Even the noble ones also use conventional truth or conventional destination. The noble ones also would say that this is my alms bowl. I'm going for alms rounds and so on. But they do not use this conventional destination with wrong view, with clinging to the notion of self. But worldlings who do not understand ultimate truth through meditation, mindfulness meditation, they have strong clinging to the notion of the self, such as the idea of I, me, you, yours, and so on. So in that way, they may experience suffering because of this view of or notion of self, or notions of an I, you, my, yours, and so on. So one who has experience in the practice of mindfulness meditation and able to develop better and better experiences or clearer wisdoms to understand the ultimate truth, then they may able to conduct themselves well, maintain equanimity to a certain extent when facing or encountering the vicissitude of life, because the notion of self, there's no strong grasping or clinging to that notion of self, and I, or you, and so on. So one must understand there's no the truth do not contradict each others. We have to understand both type of proof well.